Palaces of Europe and Russia were not built by those who lived in them. What if kings and emperors were simply savages, settling into pre-existing structures after a global catastrophe? Why were there no toilets in Versailles or the Winter Palace? Where did millions of orphaned children around the world suddenly come from in the 19th century? And the most terrifying question? Who filled the lower floors of all ancient buildings with 3 meters of soil, turning grand entrances into basements? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new investigations and revelations. Ahead lies something that will make you see the magnificent palaces of Europe and Russia in a completely new light. Stop right now and ask yourself one simple question. Do you really believe that the civilization that created the fountains of Peterhof, where water soars 20 meters without a single electric pump, where kilometers of pipes are laid with millimeter precision, and where the hydraulic system is operated for centuries like Swiss clockwork, could not figure out how to drain waste from living quarters? All your life, you've been fed a beautiful legend about great monarchs and brilliant architects, but I will shatter that illusion right now. What you are about to see will force you to reconsider everything you believed. Imagine the 17th century Palace of Versailles. The Hall of Mirrors gleams with gold, crystal chandeliers shimmer with thousands of lights, silk and velvet are everywhere. Louis XIV, the Sun King, passes by courtiers in powdered wigs. And now, imagine the smell. A nauseating, pervasive stench of unwashed bodies and human waste. This is not artistic exaggeration, it is a documented fact. Nobles relieved themselves in corners of corridors, behind heavy drapes, in portable pots, the contents of which servants threw out of windows onto passers-by. Historians shyly avert their gaze and mumble something about the peculiarities of the era, about different notions of hygiene. They feed us tales that the nobility simply didn't like to bathe, that it was fashionable. Do you seriously believe that? People capable of calculating the load on domes weighing thousands of tons, people who created acoustically perfect halls with flawless sound distribution, these engineering geniuses suddenly forgot about a simple ceramic pipe for drainage? This is not just odd, it's the #1 clue. Let's look at Peterhof. Before you is a triumph of hydraulic engineering, a system that would make modern engineers green with envy. Water comes from the Rapsha Heights, travels dozens of kilometers through channels, creating pressure sufficient for the Samson fountain to shoot a column of water 5 stories high. Everything operates solely on gravity, without a single mechanical pump. Calculations must be meticulous. The slightest error in pipe slope, and the system either fails to generate pressure or tears apart. We're talking about precision down to fractions of a millimeter over kilometers of length. This is the level, which demands a profound understanding of fluid physics. And now tell me, how is it that these same people, these masters of hydraulics, failed to figure out how to run a pipe from the toilet to the cesspit? Sewer systems should have been child's play for them, a simple task. If you can make water soar 20 meters into the air, then diverting waste downhill at an incline is not a problem. It's obvious. Yet, it's not done. In the Winter Palace, there are 1,057 rooms, 1,786 doors, nearly 2,000 windows, and not a single, I repeat, not a single toilet or bathroom in the original design, which they present as the authentic plan. The imperial family, owning half of Europe, used chamber pots like the poorest beggars. Official history tries to convince us that sewer systems appeared in St. Petersburg only at the end of the 19th century. But hold on, granite embankments were already in place. Polygonal masonry, where blocks weighing tons fit so tightly that you can't slip a blade between them. Fountains were already flowing. Bridges across the Neva were already bearing the weight of thousands of carts. This is a technological paradox that defies logical explanation. Either you possess advanced technology, and then you have everything: plumbing, sewerage, heating, or you're sitting in a dugout, defecating in a pit behind the corner. There is no third way. Yet historians force us to swallow this absurdity. Majestic palaces and filth in the corridors simultaneously. Hidden within this contradiction lies a truth that makes museum custodians' hands tremble. What if those we call great kings and emperors didn't build these buildings? What if they simply moved into them? Imagine savages who find an abandoned skyscraper. They see elevators but don't understand how they work, so they pile firewood into them. They see plumbing, but the water supply system has long been broken, and they don't know how to repair it. So they start relieving themselves in the corners because they have no other option. That is the real picture of the 18th and 19th centuries. We're not looking at builders, we're looking at inhabitants, people who entered finished structures and tried to adapt them to their primitive way of life. This is what's called cargo cult mentality. When natives build airplanes out of straw, hoping the gods will send them supplies again. But our so-called ancestors turned out to be smarter. They didn't make copies, they simply occupied the originals. Cleared away dirt and mud, installed their furniture, hung their portraits on the walls. But to launch life support systems, to restore functionality, they lacked the means. Palaces without toilets are not architectural mistakes. They are evidence that the original purpose of these spaces was entirely different. Perhaps what we call ballrooms were actually technical floors, energy hubs. And those enormous vases in museums weren't used for flowers at all. But if the palaces were built by those who didn't live in them, let's examine the technical details that finally bury the official version. When restorers uncover ancient fountain systems, they find pipes whose quality surpasses many modern examples. These are perfectly smooth, cast-iron pipes with joints that we now call flanged. The manufacturing technology for them has been lost. We don't know how they were made. Modern industry struggles to reproduce such casting precision even on automated lines. Now explain to me, civilization, supposedly incapable of producing simple porcelain toilets for an imperial palace, how did it cast kilometers of high-strength pipes capable of withstanding monstrous water pressures? It's like finding an engine from a sports car, perfectly assembled and tuned, inside a wooden cart pulled by a horse. This discrepancy screams that the creators of the fountains and the residents of the palaces are different people, separated not by years, but by an entire chasm of technological level. Now, let's shift our gaze from the pipes to the buildings themselves. Approach the Winter Palace, the Mikhailovsky Castle, any ancient structure in the center of St. Petersburg, Moscow, Paris, or Rome. Look down at street level. What do you see? Windows half buried beneath the asphalt. The upper part of the window openings protrudes above the sidewalk, while the lower part is hidden underground. Historians call this a cultural layer and explain that over 200 or 300 years, people have accumulated so much dirt beneath their feet that the ground level has risen by 3, sometimes 5 meters. Consider this nonsense. 3 meters. That's the height of an entire floor. Are you telling me that the inhabitants of the world's wealthiest capitals lived for centuries knee-deep in filth, didn't clean the streets, but simply compacted trash and built new pavements over the old? And meanwhile, the first-floor windows slowly sank into the ground, and people did nothing. Just watched as their houses disappeared into the earth? This isn't history. It's a description of a pigsty in utter decay. But once you start excavating, the official version crumbles into dust. Archaeologists, unearthing foundations, find that these so-called basements have full windows with decorative frames, grand entrances with stucco, beautiful arch masonry. Who in their right mind would decorate a basement originally intended to be underground? Who would spend effort and money on stone carvings where no one would ever see them? The answer is painfully obvious. These floors were above ground. The buildings were taller. And then something happened. Something that buried entire cities beneath layers of clay and soil several meters thick. This isn't just debris accumulation. It's the trace of a catastrophe. A global cataclysm that researchers of alternative history call a clay flood. Imagine a wave of liquid mud, a planetary-scale mudslide, covering cities, flooding the first floors, then hardening into a thick layer. And there you stand, survivor or latecomer, before a building whose upper floors protrude from the ground. No excavators, no machinery capable of digging out millions of cubic meters of earth. What do? You simply level the surface to the third floor, turn a window into a door, and start living. But where are the toilets? They remain down there, beneath a thick layer of hardened clay meters deep. The technical floors, where the water supply and sewage systems were housed, are buried. Pipes are broken, filled with soil, inaccessible. What options do you have left? Night pots and bucket toilets, which you throw out the window directly onto that very cultural layer, evidence of a planetary cleansing. Look at the old engravings and paintings by Ruinists, Piranesi, Hubert Robert, dozens of other masters. Official science claims these are fantasies, romantic inventions. But then why are these fantasies so meticulously documented? On their canvases, we see majestic yet ruined buildings, arches overgrown with vegetation, colonnades buried under earth. And amidst these colossal ruins, tiny figures scurry about. They boil stew over fires in the middle of temples, dry cloth on broken statues, herd goats in shattered palaces. These are not fantasies. This is documentary footage of an apocalypse. This is us, a civilization that came to the ashes and settled into what remains. But the lack of sewage systems is not even the strangest detail. Look at the heating system. The vast halls of the Hermitage, Versailles, ceiling heights of 5 or 6 meters, windows spanning entire walls. And heating? Small decorative fireplaces, more like ornaments than functional devices. Have you ever tried to heat a hanger with a single candle? In the Russian winter, when it's -30 outside, these fireplaces are just mockery. Even burning whole forests of wood around the clock, all the heat would rise to the ceiling, leaving the lower parts freezing, blood-chilling cold. Official history tells us that kings and emperors wandered inside palaces in fur coats. But then, why build a palace in northern latitudes if it has insulation like a summer gazebo in southern France? It's architectural suicide. Unless these buildings were originally designed for a completely different climate, or for entirely different heating technologies we haven't even imagined. There's a theory fiercely rejected by academia, that within these palace walls, a system of air ducts was laid out, powered not by burning wood, but by atmospheric electricity, by the free energy of the ether, which was later removed from all physics textbooks. The fireplaces we see now are crude insertions, made by those who didn't understand how to activate the main system. They simply punched holes in the walls, ruined the original engineering, inserted pipes, and started burning everything that would burn, just to avoid freezing. We see the same pattern everywhere. Doors 4 or 5 meters high, handles at chest or even head level for a modern person. Staircases with steps so high that you don't walk up them, you have to climb. Ceilings. When you look at them, a person feels like an ant. Mirrors hanging so high that it's impossible to see oneself in them without a stepladder. All of this screams one thing. Palaces were not built for people of 175. This is architecture for beings of entirely different proportions. We, Lilliputians in the land of giants, have simply occupied their homes and now try to convince ourselves that these are our achievements. We admire the stucco moldings on ceilings, but cannot reproduce the composition of the plaster that has lasted centuries without a single crack. We gaze at the granite columns of St. Isaac's Cathedral and cannot explain what tools were used to carve them, because we do not have chisels of such hardness even in the 21st century. Official documents about the construction look like clumsy forgeries. Estimates don't add up, figures don't match, deadlines are squeezed to absurdity. We are told that St. Isaac's took 40 years to build, but if we count the number of granite blocks and the actual time needed for their manual processing, as history claims, it should have taken not decades, but millennia. Either they possess technologies kept secret from us, Or they didn't build anything at all, but simply restored what they unearthed. And here arises the most terrifying question. If there truly was a catastrophe, if cities were buried under clay, if technologies were lost, then where did all the people go? Where did the builders of these wonders, the creators of fountains and palaces, vanish? Why do mid-19th century paintings depict cities as if they were sets for a post-apocalyptic film? Deserted avenues of Petersburg, empty squares of Paris. No crowds, no market hustle, no lively city energy. Rare solitary figures wander among majestic buildings like ghosts. This is not an artistic device. It is a documentary record of the emptiness that followed the purge. Let's face the truth and turn to a language that cannot be forged: mathematics and statistics. Open any graph of Earth's population growth. You will see a picture that official science cannot explain. For thousands of years, the graph remains almost flat. The planet's population hardly changes, with minor fluctuations within margin of error. And then, suddenly, in the mid-19th century, there's a vertical leap. The line shoots upward almost at a 90-degree angle. We are told this is the result of the Industrial Revolution and medical advances. But look at the photographs from those very years, the early daguerreotypes of the 1840s. Paris, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Rome. What unites all these images? Absolute, ringing emptiness. The cities appear deserted. Historians mumble about long exposures of early cameras, claiming that moving people blurred and vanished from the frame. That is the most absurd lie, aimed at those who have never held a camera in their hands. If the exposure was so long, why are the shadows cast by buildings and trees sharp and clear? Why is the water in fountains and rivers frozen, not blurred into a smear? Why aren't the flags in the buildings smudged by the wind into stripes? And most importantly, where are the wagons? Where are the horses that would stand motionless for hours? Where are the market stalls that don't move at all? They're not there. The cities are fully prepared, with majestic architecture and paved roads, but they are completely empty. These aren't cities. They are set pieces waiting for actors. And here we come to a fact that will make anyone who can still think independently shudder. In the 19th century, millions of orphans suddenly appear all over the world. Think about those words. Millions of children without parents. Massive orphanages open in Moscow, St. Petersburg, London, Paris. In the United States, they launch a program cynically called orphan trains. Columns of wagons carry tens of thousands of children from the East Coast to the Wild West. They are handed out to farmers as free labor, like livestock. Where did these armies of homeless children come from? Where are their fathers and mothers? Where did all the adults go at once? Could it be that a selective disease swept across the entire planet simultaneously, killing only parents but leaving children untouched? That's statistically impossible. Pandemics don't work that way. Wars don't work that way. No natural disaster can explain millions of orphans during peacetime on different continents at the same time. There exists a theory that makes the blood run cold. We, modern humanity, are a civilization of orphans. We are descendants of those who were artificially settled in abandoned cities after a catastrophe. They gathered us, raised us in huge orphanages that resemble factories producing obedient slaves. We were given simple surnames: Ivanovs, Petrov, Sidorov in Russia, Smiths, Joneses, Browns in America. They devised a linear story about slow evolution from savagery to civilization. And they sent us to inhabit the ruins of a world destroyed by a cataclysm. That's why we don't know our roots beyond 3 or 4 generations. Ask yourself a simple question. Can you name the name of your great-great-grandfather? Do you know where he was born? Where he is buried? For the overwhelming majority of people, The memory of their kin ends precisely in the middle of the 19th century. Beyond that, it's darkness, emptiness. As if before that moment, your ancestors simply didn't exist. Now let's return to construction and think about the logistics. We're told that St. Petersburg was built on a swamp, with stone transported there by wagons. To erect just the Church of the Savior on spilled blood, hundreds of thousands of tons of granite and marble had to be delivered. Without railroads, without modern machinery, only horse-drawn carts and river barges. Let's do the math. A horse consumes a certain amount of oats and hay per day. Thousands of horses working for years. Where was the feed for this army of animals grown? Workers also need food. Tens of thousands of people on the construction site. Where did they bring the provisions from? Now add the capacity of the dirt roads of that time. Muddy for half the year. Wagons get stuck in the mud. To ensure uninterrupted delivery of materials, the amount of dirt should be as vast as the land itself. The city should have been drowned in manure long before the first stone was laid. Yet, on old engravings and photographs, we see cleanliness and order. No mountains of excrement, no filth, no transport chaos. And now, about bricks. Have you ever wondered how many billions of bricks went into building the historic centers of St. Petersburg or Moscow? Where were the factories capable of producing such quantities? To bake 1 billion bricks, you need mountains of fuel and gigantic kilns working non-stop for decades. Where are the quarries from which the clay was taken? The entire surrounding area must be riddled with pits the size of lakes. The sky should be black with smoke from the firing furnaces. But there are no traces of this industry. None at all. The buildings stand, yet there's no industrial base for their creation. It's like finding the latest smartphone in a medieval cave. The object exists, but there's no factory, nor has there ever been one, to produce it. The conclusion is obvious. These cities weren't built in the 18th or 19th centuries. They have stood here for millennia. Neither Peter the Great nor Napoleon laid their foundations. They were excavated from beneath layers of dirt and clay. Water was pumped out of their basements. New frames were inserted into surviving windows, and they were declared achievements of their time. And now, the puzzle forms a grim picture. If the previous civilization that built these colossal structures was so technologically advanced, perhaps it differed from us biologically as well. Recall ancient legends of people who fed not on ordinary food, but on manna from heaven, prana, air energy. Pay attention to the layouts of palaces. They lack kitchens. The official version claims that food was prepared in separate wings and carried across the street. In freezing weather? Across the entire courtyard? Seriously? Or maybe their very concept of eating and digestion was fundamentally different? If they were beings of a different biological order, perhaps they simply didn't need sewage systems as we understand them. Maybe they possessed technologies for molecular disassembly of matter, waste teleportation, or their bodies operated on a waste-free cycle. We don't know. But one thing we do know for sure: we, the inhabitants, possess the most primitive biology. We eat, digest, excrete. And when we were introduced into these stone halls, we faced a problem. Living in luxury is possible, but there's nowhere to relieve ourselves. What did we do? We started punching holes in marble floors, building wooden outhouses in courtyards, running pipes directly into the canals originally designed for clean drinking water. We turned Venetian canals into sewer ditches. We transformed the rivers of St. Petersburg into cesspools. Because we didn't understand what these systems were created for. We are barbarians, using an electron microscope as a hammer to drive nails. Look at the palace doors, gigantic openings, with handles at face level or even higher than an average person's head. The stairs are of such height, what a modern person should not walk under, but climb up to. Ceilings that make you feel like an insect when you look at them. This is not architecture for us. These are the homes of giants. And in old books, which have not yet been removed from circulation, there are many references to people of enormous stature who lived not so long ago, just a couple of centuries back. But then something catastrophic happened. A war. Not between nations, but a war of civilizations. A war of technologies. Call it a war of gods. A war of titans. Whatever you like. The traces of this conflict are everywhere. Just open your eyes. Circular lakes of perfect geometric shape scattered across the planet. These are not natural bodies of water. They are craters from explosions of monstrous power. The scorched walls of so-called star forts. Stone turned into glassy mass by temperatures that no ordinary fire could produce. Speaking of star forts, people tell fairy tales that they are defensive structures built to protect against cannon fire. But look at their geometry from a bird's-eye view. These are not fortresses. They are intricate, fractal antennas. Schematics similar to those we see today on electronic circuit boards, but laid out in the earth and stone on a colossal scale. Water in the moats surrounding these stars served as conductors, or resonators. It was a unified planetary energy network, providing free energy, heat, and light to every inhabitant of the civilization. Palaces were not just residences. They were nodes of this network. The domes of cathedrals are not mere decorations. They are energy condensers. The crosses atop the domes are antennas for capturing atmospheric electricity. Metal links found inside the walls during restoration are not just reinforcement. They are wiring, conductive elements of a unified system. When a malfunction occurred, or someone deliberately shut down this system, civilization collapsed. A nuclear winter ensued, or the very year without summer, documented in 1816, when the world experienced abnormal cold, crop failures, and famine. The survivors regressed, lost knowledge and technology, and then new masters arrived. Puppeteers who cleared the remnants, took away all valuable equipment and blueprints, and filled the empty cities with us. People with short memories and primitive needs. They handed us shovels and said, "This was built by you, your ancestors. Be proud." And we believed. We are proud, oblivious to the fact that we live on a giant cemetery, using the temples of gods as public toilets. But the scariest part is not even that. The process of substitution and falsification has not ended. It continues right now, before our eyes. We see how history is rewritten, how inconvenient facts are destroyed. But we have proof that cannot be forged. Impossible to falsify are the millions of tons of granite. Impossible to explain the polygonal masonry of Kronstadt embankments or the walls in Peru, where blocks weighing hundreds of tons fit together with millimeter precision without a single drop of mortar. Stones cry out that we are strangers here, that we are merely temporary tenants in houses built not for us. Now a logical question arises. If such an advanced civilization once existed, where are its knowledge and records? Why don't we find blueprints for fountain systems that operate without pumps? Why no manuals for etheric heating systems? The answer is simple and terrifying. They were destroyed. Methodically, systematically, over centuries. Fire is the most effective eraser in the hands of those rewriting history. Remember how, with alarming regularity, cities burned in the 19th century? The fire of Moscow in 1812. The great fires of Chicago, San Francisco, Boston. We are told childish fairy tales about fallen candles and wooden structures. But the cities were stone. Bricks do not burn. Granite does not burn. Yet, in photographs of these fires' aftermath, we see how stone blocks disintegrated into sand, how granite melted and flowed. These are temperatures that cannot be produced by burning wood. It was no accident. It was a purge. Not just buildings were destroyed, evidence was erased. Libraries and archives were burned with particular care. This has been ongoing for centuries and continues to this day. The Library of Alexandria, the Library of Congress in the USA, the Inion Library in Moscow. Every time someone gets too close to uncovering the true chronology, when ancient blueprints or technical documents are found, a fire erupts. A short circuit, an accidental blaze, no matter. The result is the same. Manuscripts, old world maps, eyewitness testimonies are consumed. All that remains are rewritten textbooks, in which it is explicitly stated that illiterate peasants with bronze chisels created masterpieces we today cannot reproduce with laser cutters and computer modeling. We are forced to believe this under threat of being branded ignoramuses and conspiracy theorists. But the most cynical spectacle is the so-called world exhibitions of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Paris, Chicago, St. Louis. The official version claims that entire cities were built in a year or two for these exhibitions. Gigantic ancient complexes with domes, colonnades, artificial canals, fountains, and electric illumination. And after the fair closed, all of it was ruthlessly dismantled because the buildings were supposedly temporary, made of staff, a mixture of plaster and straw. Do you really believe that? Look at the photographs of these pavilions. These are monumental structures, surpassing the complexity and quality of the Capitol in Washington or St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And we are asked to believe that they were molded from plaster in a few months, only to be destroyed half a year later? That's economic madness. No one spends millions on temporary decorations of such scale. The terrifying truth is that these cities were not built specifically for exhibitions. They were excavated. These were preserved quarters of an ancient civilization, uncovered by clearing away mud and clay. They were restored. They were brought back to order and displayed before an astonished audience as either the achievements of modern industry or as architectural fantasies of brilliant master builders. And then, when the exhibition closed, these complexes were blown up and razed to the ground. Why? Because they were too perfect. They revealed a level of technology that couldn't be explained within the official narrative of steam engines and manual labor. There were moving sidewalks, horizontal escalators. Wireless electricity illuminated entire complexes without a single wire. There was acoustics we still cannot reproduce today. Leaving all that intact was impossible. People would start asking uncomfortable questions. The elites, who seized power after the catastrophe, needed to erase the memory of the golden age of technology, to turn it into a carnival attraction, to showcase it as a curiosity, and then physically destroy it. They feared that ordinary people would ask, if we can build such things out of plaster in a year, why do we live in dirty, cramped brick boxes? That's why palaces were blown up. The debris was dumped into rivers and canals, creating new embankments from the ruins of the past. And history was rewritten so that no one would ever learn the truth. We were convinced that we were moving forward on the path of progress. From tallow candles to electric bulbs, from carts to automobiles, from letters to the internet. But looking at the destroyed masterpieces of the exhibitions, recalling palaces without toilets and fountains without pumps, it becomes obvious. We are not moving forward, we are spiraling into degradation. We were given smartphones to distract us from what was taken away. They took away the free energy technologies accessible to everyone. They took away knowledge of longevity and health. They took away harmony with nature and architecture designed to last centuries. They gave us centralized sewage systems, and we boast about it as a great achievement. But they stole the eternal buildings that stand for millennia without a single crack. They provided electricity through wires, for which we pay every month. But they shut down atmospheric generators that supplied endless free energy. We live on the ashes of a civilization of gods. And the scariest part is, we ourselves helped create this ruin with our silence and blind faith in official lies. We are a generation with amnesia. We wander among the ruins whose grandeur we cannot even comprehend. We mistakenly believe these ruins are our achievements. We are proud of palaces where they used corners as toilets because they didn't know how to use sewage systems. We admire fountains without understanding that they are part of a hidden energy grid. But stones do not lie. Granite embankments, polygonal masonry, layered fill, all scream one thing. We are strangers here. We are temporary tenants in houses built not by us and not for us. And until we admit this truth, we will continue to use temples of the gods as public toilets, unaware of the greatness we sit upon. I am not trying to prove anything to you or impose my point of view. I am simply laying out the facts before you, that which official history prefers to ignore. I reveal inconsistencies that cut through the eyes of anyone capable of critical thinking. Palaces without toilets, fountains without a plausible energy source, floors buried under layers of debris, millions of orphans emerging from nowhere. These are not conspiracy theories. They are documented realities. What to do with this knowledge is only your choice. I merely invite you to see the world more broadly, from a different perspective, to stop blindly trusting textbooks written by the victors, to start asking uncomfortable questions, to seek the truth in places where official science fears to look. Investigate, doubt, compare facts, and the truth will reveal itself from the most unexpected sources, from stones that cannot lie, from photographs capturing emptiness, from blueprints that were never meant to be burned. Subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell so you won't miss new investigations. Many more mysteries and discoveries lie ahead. We will continue to find clues, pose uncomfortable questions, explore what official science tends to overlook. Because the truth is always nearby. You just need to want to see it.